Welcome this morning to this PES Network webinar. Today we'll be looking at public employment services and the trends in 2023, particularly with reference to the findings and content of the recently published capacity report of public employment services in 2023. My name's Ed Thorpe and I'll be moderating today's session, principally ensuring that things go as smoothly as possible and that we stay on track in terms of timings. I'm going to be ably supported by our PES Network expert, Eamon Davin, who you can hopefully see on your screens as well. And he'll be moderating the Q&A sessions that we'll be taking later, because we want to give all participants the opportunity to ask as many questions as possible, and we'll do our best to go through as many of those as we can. In a few moments, I'll go through the agenda in a bit more detail, and a reminder of some of the practicalities, particularly for those who are joining last minute. But first, I'd like to hand the floor over to Elodie Fazi from the PES Network Secretariat at the European Commission, DG Employment, for some opening words. Elodie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Ed. Good morning, colleagues. So I'm Elodie Fazi. I'm the head of the network, the PES Network Secretariat, which is based in the European Commission. And I have to say, I'm really pleased to welcome you today. It's our first webinar this year, and I'm really glad to see so many of you. We have people who are coming from the network, but also many people from outside the network. So I think it's really a great opportunity also for us to reach out and to also strengthen cooperation with all of you. Just as a start, maybe for those of you who are less familiar with the PES network, it was created in 2014, and this year we're celebrating our 10th anniversary. And it's a network that brings together public employment services from the 27 EU member states, but also Iceland, Norway, and Liechtenstein. And actually, the aim of the network is to strengthen the cooperation between the public employment services to really help them modernize, improve their services to customers. We have a pretty busy work program with about over 40 activities every year, and I really invite you to have a look at the Knowledge Center if you want to find out more. I will put later the link in the chat. But coming to the topic of today's webinar, so the capacity report was published a couple of months ago, and it's a report that we have published for many years already as a network. And I would say really its added value is that it gives you a snapshot of how the role of public employment services has been evolving in the EU. And I think the least we can say is that it's been evolving quite fast, really with mega trends which had a deep impact on public employment services. We are in a context where the labor market has been incredibly resilient post-COVID, with unemployment which is still close to historically low level. And where labor shortages has really become a daily concern for many PES. Also, the question of being more inclusive and getting everybody on board, I would say, is even more a concern. And as you all know, COVID has really boosted the digitalization of services. So what's unique about the capacity report is that it gives you really a wealth of data which has been provided by our members specifically for the report on very diverse issues, from staff, resources, to how they deliver the services. And this year, we've also tried to put the spotlight on a few specific issues, skills, because as you know, the European Year of Skill has just ended, but also the green transition and the youth guarantee. Well, it's really a collective work. Our members have put a lot of time into it. We also had very knowledgeable experts driving the report. So I hope you enjoy the reading. I hope you will enjoy the presentation. And without further ado, I will give the floor back to Ed to introduce the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Elodie, for those welcoming words. So now I promised that I'd go into a little bit more detail about what we're going to be doing for the next hour and a half that we have in front of us. So let's start by looking at the objectives of today's webinar. As I mentioned, the focus of the topic of the webinar is trends in 2023, looking in particular at the content of the recently published PES Capacity report. So we'll be looking at having a chance today to hear from one of the main authors of that report about its findings, and to thus gain some insights into trends and developments that we're seeing across countries, across the whole of the EU, plus Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway. As well as getting that broad kind of European perspective, we also have the opportunity to look at some inspiring national examples, which also appear in that report. and we're delighted that we're joined today by representatives from Ireland and Slovenia, who will be sharing their examples, particularly related to two of the key topics of the report from 2023, which is the youth guarantee and green transitions. So we're going to be having that mix of European and national perspectives, and each time we'll break it down into chunks, and there'll be opportunities to ask questions at each stage of the webinar. So how can we, have that conversation? How can we facilitate those questions and those exchanges? As most people, I think, are familiar these days with how webinars work, not all participants, unfortunately, can have the opportunity to open their microphone and ask their questions orally. So we use a question and answer feature. This webinar, we're doing that outside of the WebEx platform. So we'll be giving the opportunity to ask questions via Slido. For those of you who know Slido, you can already open it up on your phone or laptop, and you can already put in the code PES to access that. But we will we're going to launch a first poll in a few moments, and that will also be, we'll go through that in a bit more detail to make sure that everyone can get on. So those are the objectives, and then the agenda then is, so we're now in those first 10 minutes of opening. In a couple of moments, we will launch these initial polls and make sure that everyone's comfortable and able to access Slido successfully. Then we will be handing the floor to Nicolas Duel, who is one of the authors of the Capacity Report from 2023, to give an overall presentation of some of the key contents of that report. She will also reflect on the answers that people have given to the poll questions. Will be an opportunity for questions and answers that Eamon will moderate based on those posted via Slido. So just a reminder that we will not be picking up questions from the chat. Feel free, as lots of you are already, to say hello to each other. You can make comments if you want on the chat, but the formal Q&A with our speakers will only take place through Slido. So please be aware of that and make sure that you're able to ask your questions there. So we will focus, after that overall presentation from Nicola, we will dive into the topic of green transitions with particular reference to a national example from Ireland. After that, we will be looking at the youth guarantee with a particular example from Slovenia. And those national examples, I think, really bring the context to life, make things more tangible, and hopefully people will find those examples inspiring for ongoing work in their own countries. And then we will wrap up, and we're aiming to finish on time at 11:30 Central European time this morning. So with that said, I think that's we can start to look now at the opening polls. So if people can go to Slido, if you can open Slido on your device, sli.go. So there's so sli.go or slido.com, and you need to tap in the code PES, and you should get into a platform which offers you polls and Q&A. So obviously later on, once we started hearing our presenters, you can start putting your questions into that already when they're speaking. Don't wait until the end, because Eamon can already start taking a look at them while our presenters are speaking, so that he can pick up on some of the most interesting questions. Feel free to upvote people's questions. If someone's already asked something that you wanted to ask, that helps us see where the interest really lies and focus attention on the questions that have the most interest. So hopefully people are on Slido. There's a link in the chat for anyone struggling to access, and a reminder of the code. That said, I think we can hopefully launch the first question of the poll. So these questions are not designed to test your knowledge. We're looking to see what people's expectations are and their sort of instincts about the situation in 2023. So the first question is to ask people whether they think that the total number of registered unemployed in 2023 went down, decreased, went up, increased, or remained about the same. So this might be, you might have a distinct national perspective, which will influence your answer. But we're looking really kind of across the whole of the EU, plus Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway. So I see that numbers are still picking up. We've had about 70 responses so far, which is quite good. I'll just give you a couple of moments to finish answering that. Okay, and if we can maybe already launch the second question. So the second question is asking you to estimate, as well as you can, the percentage of PES that you think are cooperating with employers specifically to adapt to the green transition in 2023. So again, we're not expecting you necessarily to know the answer, but what's your instinct? What do you think based on your experience and what you've observed in your country? And I'm not going to comment on people's answers. I'm going to leave that to our expert, Nicola, later on when she gives us her overview. She'll pick up and feedback on the answers people have given and to see to what extent people's expectations are matched by the content of the report. So I will leave that role with Nicola. I won't attempt to do that myself. Okay, we're up to, I think most of the people that answered the first question have answered the second question. We're up to similar numbers. So we can move, I think, to question 3 already. So looking at digital services, in your opinion, in 2023, how many PES offered digital services to job seekers, to job-seeking customers in their context? And there's a range there. You can choose between 30 and 50 PES, between 20 to 30, and then less than 20. I think that should be 21 to 30, that middle one. Okay, well, hopefully that's got everyone onto Slido, and everyone that wants to join Slido and feels they might want to ask a question has been able to join. If you're struggling in any way, please do post in the chat, and people can offer you support to ask that if you're in any way having difficulties accessing Slido. But feel free now to move from the polls bit of Slido to the Q&A, and as our presenters are speaking, start already to post your questions, and we'll pick up on as many as we can. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our first presenter, who is Nicola Duel, who is a thematic expert of the PES Network and one of the principal authors of the report looking at PES capacity in 2023. So Nicola is going to give us an overview really of the key messages and content of that report, looking at labour market dynamics, and also PES capacity specifically, and strategic objectives and evolutions in the work and priorities of PES in 2023. So Nicola, you have 20 minutes. I'll give you a kind of a warning 3 minutes before the end, just to try and keep us as on track as possible. But for now, Nicola, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ed, for your introduction, and good morning to everyone. So I'm pleased to present the key outcomes of the PES Capacity Report 2023, which has been a big effort with many other colleagues being involved as well. So just to make that clear. Next slide, please. So Elodie already gave quite comprehensive overview of the objectives, so I'm not going to go more into details of that, as that has already been said. But I would like to really underline again that the main data come from this report come from the capacity questionnaire. So 31 PESs in the EU, and Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein have responded to this questionnaire between July and December 2023. And we have also used bench learning data collection. Next slide, please. So the labor market trends, the first poll. So in fact, what we have seen that the development of the number of registered unemployed has been declining in all but one PES. So in 97% of the PES, there has been a decline in registered unemployed. So overall, there has been a drop by 9.8%. And in an unweighted average, there was a decline of 16.4% of registered unemployed. So more optimistic, I think, than the poll results. I mean, the reality is more showing a better shape of the labor market. Next slide, please. Looking a little bit deeper into what has happened with this decrease of registered unemployed, we have seen an unprecedented decrease in long-term unemployment between 2020 and 2021 after the strong rise during the pandemic. So that is a good news, a decrease in long-term unemployment. And the steepest kind of fall was among registered youth unemployment with a decrease of 18%. And to give a full picture, just to add, that has been an increase in vacancies over the same period, about 25.9%. So that is then the figures also perhaps reflecting a little bit on the good shape of the labor market, and also on the labor shortages, at least in the sign that the vacancies have increased. Next slide, please. So that was kind of the labor market context. Now, when we have a look to the institutional context of the PES, we see that the PES institutional landscape has been rather stable over the year, with the legal status in most of PESs, and that has not really changed, with PESs being independent public institutions. But there are also a number of PESs which are integrated into the responsible ministries. However, with varying kind of responsibilities of the regional levels and also the local levels. Despite or within these kind of stable institutional context, there have been reforms in the activities of the PESs. And here we have seen increases in efficiency in service delivery, which has been obtained mainly through introducing new processes and tools, improving service delivery models, and through digitalization, as mentioned by 12 PES. We have seen a strengthening of the regional levels, and we have also seen a bigger impact and a bigger importance of partnership approaches. Then we have seen reforms including performance management approaches, and in one example I would like to highlight the competence-based job matching system, as mentioned by a few PES, and skills assessment and development. Here also we have seen kind of a lot of dynamics with introducing new activities, for example, counseling employers on job training, or introducing an individual skills account scheme, just to name a few examples. Next slide, please. So what about the PES expenditures? We have heard about the good or the improving labor market shapes. We know that we have still structural problems at the labor market, although it has improved compared to the pandemic situation in particular. So what does that mean for the expenditures of the public employment services? So when looking only at employment services and the delivery of active labor market programs, so excluding unemployment benefits, we see kind of a picture showing as many PES with decreasing expenditures as PES with increasing expenditures. So from the 22 PESs who have answered that question. But we have seen that the number of PES facing decrease in expenditure, it's the highest observed for the past 10 years. So yeah. So next slide, please. So what were the strategic objectives against these labor market background of the public employment services in 2023? So I'm looking here at those who are job seekers related, those who are employer related, and those who are more related to the overall matching target. So looking first at the job seekers, some PESs have formulated just general objectives, including reducing unemployment and reducing benefit dependency. More rarely, PES have also mentioned avoiding unemployment, so from a preventive perspective. When setting objectives regarding to target groups, we see that still PES put mainly the targets on vulnerable groups, so long-term and disadvantaged groups, so long-term unemployed and people distant from the labor market, with 9 PES having these in their strategic objectives. People with disabilities, unemployed youth, women less often, migrants only 1, but when it comes from people displaced from Ukraine, we have 3 PESs having that in their objectives. Low-skilled and older workers, only 1, and minimum income recipients. It needs to be stressed that some PES follow really kind of dedicated individualized and person-centered service provision and do intentionally not set objectives for target groups, which does not mean that these target groups are underserved. It's just that they are not spelled out as specific target groups, perhaps with KPIs for these target groups and so on, just to that you don't get a wrong perspective on how well disadvantaged groups might be taken up. When looking at the employer-related objectives, given the named labor shortages, it's not astonishing that filling vacancies and improving the matching to address employers' needs has been kind of really formulated as targets. And when looking more at the overall matching target and the labor market functioning, interestingly, new topics come up like enlarging the workforce, including activating inactive individuals, speed up labor market transitions, address the skills mismatches, which as such is not news, and reducing regional disparities. And then we have 3 PES who set improving client satisfaction as an objective for their performance. Next slide, please. So the public employment services are kind of promoting digitalization through training offers, but they are also themselves implementing digitalization to increase their efficiencies. And this has continued to be accelerated. So all in all, 11 PES have initiated digital strategies. 20 PES have accelerated their digital strategies. And now coming also to one of the poll questions, in fact, 21 out of 31 PES offer digital services to job seekers. So it's not all, but more than whole. And 25 out of 31 offer digital services to employers. So employers get more digital services, in fact, for more PESs, let's formulate it like that, than job seekers. And 58, so a little bit more than half of PES have digital vacancies registration. Perhaps just to name and to have a little spotlight on which services are more likely to be digitalized and which services are more likely to still be delivered in person or to be delivered in a mixed format of person and digital service delivery. We will see that for job seekers, setting up individual action plan is still something done more often in individual in person and mixed rather than only digital. The same would be true for career guidance. And looking at the employer services, we would see a little bit the same picture, that employment advisory services are still delivered in person and mixed rather than only digital. Next slide, please. So what are the PES doing really to address labor shortages? As we have seen, that is one of the main challenges. And in fact, PES have been connecting with employers quite a lot. So when we look into the figure, all in all, 86% of PESs offer more or different types of services to employers than before. Interestingly, the PES quite often, so quarter of the PESs reach out more often to employers to place the disadvantaged groups. They also intensified consultations with the social partners. And they cooperate also more with employers really on systems for labor market information and labor market intelligence, and also for kind of setting up, designing and delivering services. So there's a really great cooperation here with employers to tackle labor shortages. So a third, perhaps just a last mention, third of the PES develop new cooperation with private jobs and job portals and employment services. Next slide, please. This is on the side what they do for the employers to tackle the labor shortages. Now we will have a look on what they do, a closer look on what they do to improve the employability of job seekers. So first, perhaps as a vision that young people, older people, and long-term unemployed and refugees are all kind of target groups, important target groups, more or less in all the ALMPs, except of course with sheltered employment, where people with disabilities play, of course, have a bigger share. But the new trends really after the COVID recovery to address new challenges is addressing the needs of inactive population. So the young people, we come to it with the youth guarantee a bit later. Supporting workers at risk of losing their work. So that is kind of really a new shift, really a new target and a new emphasis on the digital and green skills for employability. So just in figures, half of PES reach out to inactive individuals which are not registered yet with the public employment services. And even more PES reach out to employed workers at risk of becoming unemployed, or at specific vulnerable groups of employed workers, which can be the low skilled, for example, or older workers, for example, in the workplaces. And more generally, workers which are at risk of unemployment because of technological changes, etc. So that is really kind of an important shift, and which certainly also goes into the prevention of unemployment, or at least the early action to adapt the skills of workers, also in the view of long-term overcoming the skills requirements by employers. Next slide, please. So this brings us really also to the role of the Public Employment Service in skills and training. So the PES involvement in skills development remains mostly in skills assessment and in training provision. So we see that 90% of PESs are either fully or partly involved in skills assessments. So when I say partly, it means together with other, in partnership with other institutions and organizations. Still, interestingly, the provision of the training for the unemployed is delivered by 39% have the full PES responsibility, and 48% are doing that in partnership with other organizations. Still, if we take kind of the full responsibility and the partly responsibility, so with other organization of providing training to those still in employment, as we saw these vulnerable group, the group at who are at risk of unemployed, or some vulnerable groups being in employment. All in all, more than half of PES are providing training or are at least involved in providing training for this group of employed workers. They are less often involved in skills recognition and skills validation, but still are present on these two topics. Next slide, please.
Nicola, just you're perfectly on time.
Yes.
So no worries, but I just thought before you deliver your key messages and your kind of final remarks, I wanted to do a couple of reminders. First of all, a reminder, please start asking your questions. If you have any questions about what Nicola's been presenting and the content of the report, please go on to Slido with the code PES and start asking your questions, because I will hand over to Eamon shortly to take those questions. If not, Eamon, I think if you have questions, you'll guide us through that. The other thing was, I thought just before we do the key messages, Nicola, whether we could have a brief reflection on the answers that people gave to the poll questions. So if we could take that now, and if we can perhaps get the answers that people gave up onto the screen, if that's possible, and then Nicola can briefly talk to those answers and to what extent they fit with the reality of what we see in the what we saw in the report. So there we go, Nicola. I'll let you talk through these. Thank you.
Okay, so your answers were, so 61% of you answered that the total number of registered unemployed was decreasing, and 25% increased or remained stable. So in fact, what we had seen was a much stronger decrease in the number of registered unemployed by the PES. Yeah. So the green transition will be the next topic coming then, but just nevertheless, we can take this question here. You'd say that less than 30% of PES cooperate with employers, that the majority, what you will be thinking, between 30 and 50% of PES would or more than 50%, only 10%. We will come to that later, but in reality, more than 50% of PESs cooperate with employers for the green transition. But I leave that for the next session to go into more details of this. And how many PES offer digital services to job-seeking customers? So 58% of you say that between 30 and 50 PESs do it. So all in all, and yeah, and or between 21 and 31 of PESs. So that's a little bit less, I think, of what we have seen in the figures which I showed you before. So digitalization is probably a bit more advanced than you thought. Also, it's not 100%. I think there are limitations anyhow, and that was quite reflected in the in that kind of providing counseling is still perhaps something which also people want to have often face to face, and which perhaps can be better delivered face to face. But still, digitalization is not there in all core functions at 100%, and there's certainly room, but it's already a bit better than you thought it would be.
Thank you very much, Nicola. So I'll hand back now to you to give us your final messages. And then Eamon, once Nicola's finished, if you want to come straight in and maybe comment on what you've heard and any questions that you might have for Nicola. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just really a very kind of condensed summary of the key messages. So the PES structure are stable and have shown resilience to transformative forces we have seen. There has been balanced spending priorities, and there has been quite stable human resource management. Staff at PES has been quite stable. PES are implementing strategic reform. They are adapting their services. And as a key, really strong message, they are intensifying their collaborations with the employers. And PES remain critical in connecting employers with qualified workers, especially in times of labor and skill shortages. And PES play a pivotal role in driving the green transition, supporting the youth guarantees, the two topics we will kind of deepen a bit later, in accelerating the digitalization, and in growing responsibilities and skills, as I have shown in more detail in one of my slides. Yes, and that was the key messages, and I think kind of a summary of the 10 key takeaways will be on the next slide. If you can move to the next slide. Yes. So just the key takeaways, just to recall them. Unemployment has never been lower. PES reform their services, but the core mandates remain stable. There has been new activation measures, tailored services to address labor shortages, PES support and skilling and reskilling, facilitators to the youth guarantee, the greening and the digitalization. EU funds have been used to support PES performance. The PES human resources have remained stable, and related to the PES performance, something which I've perhaps not told before, that working patterns are changing in course with the digitalization. We see more remote and hybrid working arrangements, and that would mainly be for the central PESs and less for the local offices. So that's it for the moment from my side. Happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much, Nicola, for an extremely interesting summary of this year's capacity report. You started your very interesting presentation with a kind of analysis of the labour market, explaining an overall healthy situation, low levels of unemployment, but still some structural problems. Listening to you, I was wondering whether you could comment on whether you've noticed any particularly significant changes to the internal structures of employment services as a consequence of the inevitable increase in vacancies. So vacancies increasing. Have you noticed any particular adjustments they've made to deal with this increase in vacancies and try and fill the vacancies more quickly, perhaps?
No, as I said, there has not been kind of a structural adjustment as such. What can be mentioned that quite interesting, the majority of PES assign their staff dedicated to dedicated employer services and job seeker services, though that is really something kind of division of tasks within the PES. So you have specialized PES staff. Additionally, we have example of PESs who have also include external partners who have outsourced some of the counseling, for example, to employers to overcome their skills shortages. So we see an increase really also in the counseling, but there is also a new focus really in how the services are done on really trying to deliver the training adapted to employers' need and to have improved cooperations with the employers and with training institutions so that the training deliver is really kind of matching the needs of the employers, which of course is quite important if you want to tackle the issue of skills shortages.
Thank you. You mentioned some quite interesting developments, perhaps a more proactive approach dealing with people in work who are potentially perhaps at a high risk of becoming unemployed. Some increased focus on reaching out to perhaps discouraged, inactive, unregistered people to register with the PES to take advantage of the vacancies that are available. So perhaps more preemptive work. Do you think any particular change has been particularly significant over the last year? Anything PES are doing now that you thought really struck you as a great departure or a real new emphasis on something they hadn't done before?
So I think so you just mentioned different kinds of groups. So when we look at the inactives, certainly a new group which came up was placing people displaced from Ukraine. So that is kind of a new group to bring into to the labor market and to raise the awareness that the PES services are there for them. As you mentioned, I think it is in such a really kind of a big shift that the PESs are trying to offer their services for people who are still in employment. This also goes, of course, only in cooperation. Yeah, and what else we have seen? For example, also improving client services in the area of case management. Okay. That is something perhaps worthwhile mentioning as well.
Okay. We've now got a couple of questions coming in the Slido, which is very helpful. Particularly, as the registration of job seekers is declining, have you noticed any particular increase in outreach services overall in terms of numbers, more people being contacted through outreach? Was that something that was emerging from the survey?
Yes, absolutely. There are more PESs who are outreaching. We do not have the numbers of how many people have been outreached.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned in terms of activities, work to cope with labour shortages. Have you got any further insights on how these activities are actually impacting at all? Perhaps on labour shortages, are they having a very clear kind of impact on addressing labour shortages, do you think, the actual new activities being taken? Have we got any evidence they're making a difference in targeting shortage sectors?
I think what we have from the PES questionnaire. So really, our study is really kind of relying on the PES answers of what they are doing. So it's more kind of an input questions we got. So, and PES definitely do more. I think that it potentially has an impact, could probably be seen in the fact that more employers are really cooperating with the PES to overcome their labor shortages. And as I said, in cooperation as well, networks at sector level, networks at regional level, to really kind of understand what the needs, skilled needs of employers are. PESs are, for example, conducting surveys among employers. They are involved in conducting sector studies to get a deeper involvement, a deeper understanding of really what the need of employers is, and they try either through the own provision of training or through their partners to address that. And here again, I mean, the great interest of the partners and the employers in getting kind of tailor-made training provisions to clothe their skill shortages would be kind of clearly, you could see it as an impact, as a potential impact to really addressing that.
Yeah. Thank you. I know we're kind of unfortunately running out of time, but now lots of questions. But have you got any kind of insights you could share with us about the nature of the training that employment service staff are receiving? Any evidence they're receiving different training, training in new areas?
I do not have on top of my head, but perhaps someone, Elodie, is kind of sharing a link where you can find on staff management and training information.
So something people can look at when they've perhaps got a bit more time. Can you see any particular link, Nicola, between this increased focus on vulnerable groups and more people in vulnerable groups being able to access employment? So have we seen any evidence that the labour market situation of people furthest from integration has actually improved as a consequence of this new emphasis that employment services are taking?
I mean, what we have seen clearly at the beginning was these drop in long-term unemployment, and we know from other recoveries that if the economy recovers, not necessarily the long-term unemployed are not automatically benefiting from economic recovery. So if we see really the decline in long-term unemployed, this could be interpreted as a result of activities really to bring people into work, for example, long-term unemployed. And we know that some PESs also have new activities, for example, to bring people with disabilities into work. So, for example, jobs fairs are organized to place people with disabilities in Slovenia. We have some PESs who have increased their models or their ways of bringing people with disabilities into sheltered employment and supported employment and rehabilitation services. That is something which we can see. In Ireland, there has been a people with disability. There has been a people with disabilities employment program with a part of ESF functioning. So we see that PESs have implemented, or they have also in the past, but they have continued so to implement dedicated programs for people, for vulnerable groups. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Nicola, and thank you very much, Eamon. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. In fact, we went over slightly because I wanted to give a bit of time to answer some of those questions which came through a little late. But now you'll see that I've highlighted one of the questions asked was about a bit more information about the green transition and how PES are supporting that, which feeds nicely into the next part of today's session. There was also a practical question about slides, and indeed the recording of today's webinar and slides will be made available on the PES Network website, so look out for that. But yeah, without further ado, to try and catch up a bit of time, Nicola, I'm going to ask you to give us a bit of an introduction, an overview of green transition, which is now in the spotlight of our session today, before we hear a national example of an inspiring practice from Ireland. So Nicola, if you can give us an overview, thank you very much.
Sure, sure. So next slide. Give you. So that was one of the key figures. So what are they really doing? So PES cooperate with employers on question of restructuring. So these was 61% of PESs have responded to do so, or 19 out of those who responded. And yeah, so what are they doing? This was just to remind the poll. So what are they doing? Let's start from a more kind of structural part. So first of all, PES have been concerned with the question to define green jobs. So what are green jobs and what are skills needed for green jobs? So how that unclear definition, there is no common definition. So PES, 11 out of the 31 PES are involved in activities to define green jobs. So these activities can also be in cooperation with other ministries or with other stakeholders, but PES will be involved, and this involvement is quite important because it helps PES to define their own strategies and also their own kind of active labor market programs like wage subsidy. You need to know what are you going to support or to subsidize. So it is quite important, in fact, to have a clear definition of the green jobs. And so there has been quite some work going on in the last years on getting closer to a definition. Then half of the public employment services are involved in identifying the skills relevant for the green transition. And 2/3 of the PES are providing training opportunities to upskill and reskill for the green transition. So within their kind of skills mandates, we see that really the greening is coming in. And as said, many PES cooperate with the employers to adapt on the green transition. And this is really kind of to identify together with the employment the needs for the green jobs, to support employers in the context of industrial restructuring, and also by implementing employment subsidies for green jobs set in law. So next slide, please. So I mentioned several times that PESs are kind of what they are doing to support the greening of the labor market, let's put it like that. They have to do it, of course, in partnerships. So one area where PESs are involved very closely with the social partners and also other actors on the ground are when it comes to mitigating either impacts of industrial restructuring linked to the green transition, and also in skills development linked to the green transition. So that will be very often on a sectoral basis as well as on a regional basis. So one example would be, for example, the involvement in the context of the closures or closing down of coal minings, for example, in Poland, in Germany, and in Spain. Or we have a case in northern Sweden where they are involved in bringing people to new sites and to bring in the new workers. So it goes into both directions. We see a lot of sector approaches. For example, in Belgium, we have the cooperation between Le Forum and the construction sector to identify really what the skills needs are here with regard to the greening. And the construction sector is certainly one of the key sectors here. We have examples of cooperating very closely with sectors also in kind of having these skills alliances in regions. We will have the one interesting example from Ireland, which is going to shed light on these skills partnerships. And then there is another kind of area of cooperation which is emerging, that is cooperating with private job portals for placing job seekers into green jobs. However, only 16% at the moment are cooperating with the private job portals, specifically on green jobs. Next slide, please. So really just to summarize, what are they doing for promoting the greening of the economy is really, on the one hand, mitigating the effects, the negative effects of industrial restructuring, making sure that labor shortages can be met, and most importantly, adapt the skills. So that is kind of, but in addition to that, the PES also promote their sustainability internally. And with regard to the strategies they have internally for their own organizations, we see that 48% of PES have adopted internal sustainability strategies or green transition agenda, and 34% have specific environmental impact goals or KPIs aiming to reduce the environmental impact of PES. So what does that mean in practice? So what areas, so what maneuver has a PES to be sustainable as an organization? So the areas which have been named by the PES are the buildings themselves, so trying to reduce energy consumption, space consumption, use solar panels, for example.
Thank you, Nick. I think people can, hopefully people can see those the key activities. I think we want to get as quickly as possible now onto the national practices. Thank you very much for that excellent overview of green transitions. Now let's hear the inspiring national example, and we're delighted to be joined by someone from Ireland. It's Gráinne Timlin, who is from SOLAS, which is the Climate Strategy and Skills Office at the Further Education and Training Authority of Ireland. And Gráinne is Assistant Manager there. So for the next maximum 10 minutes, Gráinne, and I'll give you a kind of a 2-minute warning as we approach the end. But if you could give us a bit of a dive into what you've been doing in Ireland, we look forward to hearing about your national inspiring practice. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Good morning. Thank you for the lovely introduction. It's great to be here today. As has been said, my name is Gráinne Timlin, and I'm the Assistant Manager with the Climate Strategy and Skills Unit in SOLAS. So the next slide, please. I'm happy to share some of the Irish experience in vocational education and training, or FET as we call it in Ireland, Further Education and Training. So I'll be referring to FET as opposed to VET. I'll be looking very briefly at the Irish context and our work in the Climate Strategy and Skills Unit in SOLAS, who is the national FET authority. SOLAS is responsible for funding, monitoring and oversight of over a €1 billion budget for provision in apprenticeships and other training and upskilling, delivered via a network of 16 education and training boards, or ETBs. We will look in particular at one very important strand of the SOLAS FET strategy, which is FET for sustainability. And I'll give an example of specialist skills centres that have been set up to deliver nearly zero energy building, or NZEB, and retrofit upskilling and training, before concluding with a very important body of work we've commissioned with KPMG to develop Ireland's first national strategy on FET skills for the green transition. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, I work in the Climate Strategy and Skills Unit with Susan Gill, the manager, and colleagues Sophia Ferrero Gomez and Sheila Houghton. We report into the Construction and Climate Action Directorate. Our role is to oversee the funding, policy development and implementation of PES initiatives designed to help meet Ireland's targets in line with the Climate Act 2021 and decarbonisation targets to halve emissions by 2030 and be net zero by 2050. The importance of mitigating climate change via sustainable development was identified as a critical focus for SOLAS in its future FET Transforming Learning, FET Education and Training Strategy 2020 to 2024. And a key commitment included the modernisation of construction skills to develop capabilities around energy, building and the environment. Green skills, as has been mentioned, are much talked about, and there's no absolute consensus on the definition, as it can mean something different to different people in different organisations. Our preferred definition is the CDFOP one, which defines green skills as the knowledge, abilities, values and attitudes needed to live, work and act in economies and societies seeking to reduce the impact of human activity on the environment. Next slide, please. So, thanks. Our unit, since it was set up in 2021, looks to all the various policy areas and national directives, which are all underpinned, of course, by the EU level policies, such as the European Green Deal and the principle of just transition. Essentially, anything green comes under us. We work with external stakeholders across numerous sectors, including construction and built environment, renewable energy, agriculture, transport, waste management, bioeconomy, including tourism, hospitality, finance, etc. We work to identify current and emerging climate-related skills gaps. We're uniquely placed to respond to critical needs as the FET infrastructure is established in all 26 counties with ETBs across up and down the country in all communities, towns and cities. Added to this, FET continues to play a key role in meeting strategic challenges with online flexible delivery of courses at all levels supported to be inclusive and address literacy issues. This needs to happen within society for all citizens, and FET for Communities is about supporting the participation of disadvantaged learners within the communities. Community education is particularly effective at addressing important societal topics such as climate justice education, education for sustainable development and building climate literacy. Next slide, please. So as I referenced earlier, the SOLAS FET strategy places emphasis on ensuring that all FET provision is used to develop critical climate change and environmental knowledge, and that FET campuses are based on a strong sustainability ethos. This has been delivered through a number of measures, including the national rollout of 6 NZEB Centres of Excellence, as you see on the map, tailored programme development across green skills, including micro qualifications, and the continued updating of curricula across all relevant apprenticeships and all FET provision. For this morning, I'm focusing on the 6 NZEB Centres of Excellence, which you can see are based across the country in Mayo, Sligo, Leitrim ETB, Laois, Offaly ETB, City of Dublin ETB, Limerick, Clare ETB, Cork ETB and Waterford, Wexford ETB. The initial Energy Performance of Buildings Directive was amended in 2018 as part of the Clean Energy for All Europeans package. It stipulated that all new buildings from 2020 must have a high energy performance and very low energy needs, covered largely by either on-site or nearby renewable energy sources. In 2018, the first NZEB Centre of Excellence opened its doors in Enniscorthy in County Wexford, and a further 5 have come on stream, delivering the suite of NZEB programmes, such as NZEB Fundamentals, retrofitting in electrical, plastering, plumbing, bricklaying and carpentry, external wall insulation, air tightness, ventilation, insulation, solar and heat pump technologies, and the list is growing. Upskilling existing employees is a key target, but also addressing the image of the construction sector is vital to deliver at least an additional 50,000 workers in construction to build a projected 300,000 new homes and retrofit 500,000 by 2030 in Ireland. Funded by SOLAS, NZEB programmes range from starter programmes to post-apprenticeships to conversion courses, and programmes are designed in collaboration with industry for industry to address skills needs with a blended approach to learning. The theory element is delivered online where possible to minimise time off-site, with courses delivered in the evenings and at weekends to accommodate traditional working hours. Courses are tailored to meet the needs of new entrants, to skilled managers and professionals. All courses are City and Guilds assured or QQI validated and Construction Industry Federation approved, with recognised continuous professional development points available. Next slide, please. In 2023, the National Construction Training Campus in Mount Lucas, under the provision of Leithen Offaly ETB, launched a mobile NZEB training unit, which travels to construction sites across the country, bringing upskilling opportunities on site and providing easier access to those that need it most. The mobile unit is also travelling to secondary schools to introduce students to NZEB and modern methods of construction from an earlier stage. NZEB taster modules have been piloted over the past few years for transition year students who are in their 4th year in secondary education. And it's a great opportunity for future integration into the senior cycle curriculum. Centres of Excellence incorporate fully immersive training via simulated construction halls, and for some courses there's virtual reality assimilated training. At the forefront of construction training will be modern methods of construction, retrofitting and NZEB. The National Construction Training Campus will be home to Ireland's first ever demonstration park for modern methods of construction. It'll be a state-of-the-art facility, and it's key to ensuring that we can provide the necessary critical construction skills for the future. There have been 8,178 enrolments since 2018 to the end of 2023, and to the end of May 2024, there have been 3,077 enrolments. So we're well on track this year to surpass last year's figure of 4,452, which was more than twice that of 2022. So promotion also of construction to a broader, more diverse entrance is ongoing nationally and locally with various advertising campaigns. And we have a number of videos which have been produced and are available on the website. You can see there www.thisisfet.ie/NZEB. Following the recast EPBD adopted in May 24, enhancing the energy performance requires that new buildings are now transitioning to zero emission buildings, so ZEB. So NZEB is currently transitioning to ZEB, and Solus is working on a campaign to support this transition. Next slide, please.
Just one more minute, Grania.
Thank you. These measures require a lot of change across all sectors, and to keep pace with differing needs, Solus is developing Ireland's first VET strategy for the green transition. It's a huge opportunity to synthesise existing and upcoming international and national directives and to identify specific green skills for existing, new and emerging occupations. It also sees Solus forming a policy position for the green transition at levels 1 to 6 on the national framework of qualifications, which translates to levels 1 to 5 on the European framework. So by extension of today's example, the NZEB Centres of Excellence, there may be other specialist centres where needs can be identified, for example, transport or biodiversity. So you're very welcome to come to the launch of our strategy. It's on the 15th of October. 15th of October, and if anyone's interested in attending, you're welcome to email me. Nicola referenced the importance of partnerships, and I would endorse that, and my key word to leave you with is collaboration, as this is key for all stakeholders to the expansion of VET in innovative skills training to ensure that the VET response remains ahead of the curve, agile and relevant to future skills needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Grania, for that excellent overview. Eamon, with permission, I've got an eye on time, and I think I want to move as quickly as possible to make sure that we get the full national presentation on the youth guarantee. There was one specific question for Grania in the chat. You maybe take that. Grania, it's about whether you use micro-credential programs to support upskilling and reskilling in the green skills area. So maybe you could just answer that, and then we'll move. And then maybe if there's more questions later, we can come back to them at the end. But I don't want to squeeze out the other national presentation.
Yeah, so the NZEB and retrofit training is part of a broader suite of green skills provision. And as part of that, there's also micro qualifications, micro credential programs that are either embedded in existing programs or used as standalone. So there's a whole suite, myriad offerings. So not a one size fits all solution, but multi-pronged, different elements depending on the area and the skills need.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Grania. So I think, yeah, we'll move on to our next topic, which is the youth guarantee. And again, we'll have the same structure. We'll have an overview from Nicola first before we dive into a national and inspiring practice. So Nicola, in just a couple of minutes, please, if possible, if you could give us just an overview of about key messages around the youth guarantee. Thank you.
So thank you. So me again. So on the youth guarantee, next slide. So the main message here would be that really PES have progressed in implementing the youth guarantee. Now 93% of PESs are either fully managed or collaborate with partners in managing the reinforced youth guarantees. So over 50% manage it with partners, in fact. Only 32% have PES were only dedicated to the PES guarantee, so that number has even decreased. The main challenges for implementing the youth guarantee is securing sufficient funding and coordinating the efforts among the different stakeholders. As we just said, are mainly implemented in partnership. So next slide, please. So most importantly, the PES are really involved in all the 4 phases of the youth guarantee, which is the mapping, the outreach, the preparation, so organizing tailored services and offers, and offering then really kind of the services, providing individualized support, and to ensure that the offer comes timely and is of good quality. Next slide, please. Perhaps, yeah, just to add that when we say sharing responsibility with other partners, there are so typical activities which PES take fully charge of. That is registering young people. That is something we typically PES do, aligning the offer to existing standards and ensure the quality, and using profiling tools to tailor individual action plans. While when they cooperate more with partners, it is typically on outreaching to vulnerable groups, awareness raising activities, managing EU funds, and identifying the target groups as such. And if we look now into the outreach to the unregistered needs, so what is done concretely? The most activities really go through media to outreach. So it is social media channels in the first place, but it's also conventional media channels and dedicated campaigns. While on the other hand, what is also important but less often used is school registration information, so activities which go to institutions or which are in persons. In person would be through street work, for example, 25%, or to social service registers. Next slide, please. So what the improvement are also that the more PES are providing support services in the preparatory phase. The most important one are providing career guidance and advice, motivational sessions, counseling, providing preparatory short-term training, which can be in different areas, digital, entrepreneurial, career management. These are the hot topics for these short-term trainings. Then still, what has been increasing is also the offering of bridging programs. So to bridge into the vocational education and training system. Entrepreneurial guidance as well has been one of the increasing kind of preparatory measures, as well as mentoring, for example. Next slide, please. 71% of PES provide also post-placement support, so not only to prepare the young people, but for maintaining them in the job. That has been kind of identified as being quite important. So what are the PES doing here? Mainly, they are providing advice. That is the main activity. Job coaching is a very important activity as well. Support of by psychologists or social workers, for example, would be among the main activities. Others would be providing additional further training, still mentoring, so continuing the mentoring in the post placement period. And
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nick. And I would invite people as well to download the report where there's more details and these figures. You can take a bit longer to absorb these figures and the findings of the capacity report. But I want to pass the floor now, after that excellent, again, thank you again, Nicola, for your overview of the topic of the Youth Guarantee. But we have a representative from the Employment Service in Slovenia, Marieta Ursic, who was the project manager for the Presenitize project. So we look forward for the next 10 minutes to hearing about this specific example from Slovenia. So Marieta, sorry, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hello, greetings to everyone from Slovenia. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to present the Slovenian practices and especially the Presenitize project. My name is Marieta Ursic and I'm the former project manager. First slide, please. As you can see on the picture, Slovenia has one of the lowest NEET rates within the Union. However, despite of the good results, we do work with some target groups of youth that are more prone to drop out the labor market. A recent OECD study emphasized 3 of them: the Roma, young with migrant background, and single mothers. NEET rate in Slovenia is low because we have reasonably well-developed early intervention and both educational and labor market sector and good cooperation of all stakeholders. In compliance with the Youth Guarantee, the ESS conducted a fruitful ESF project with specialized counselors for youth between 2015 and 2023, which focused to improve the quality of career guidance and the transition of youth from education to employment. Great results were seen. Registered NEET has been stable, but sadly, inactive NEET rate in Slovenia has grown, what demands new approaches at addressing their needs, work that goes beyond the public employment services, building partnership of all stakeholders, and conducting projects such as Presenitize. Next slide, please. So we will begin by reviewing the project identification data. The project acronym is Presenitize, which translates to surprise yourself in English. The name emphasizes the idea of exceeding one's own expectations and discovering hidden potential. Project focused on empowering and socially activating young needs, so young people who are no longer in school, who do not have a job and are not in training to do a job. We activated 30 NEET individuals, engaged 40 mentors, identifying the needs of this NEET group, and also provided them with opportunities to participate in networking events. The overall goal of the Presenitize project is NEET integration and also systemic support. This means the project aimed to help NEETs to become more integrated into society and also to support systems they need to succeed. The Presenitize project was funded from 2 sources. It received 85% of the total project cost from the Norwegian financial mechanism 2014 to 2021 and from the funds of the Republic of Slovenia, I'm sorry, 50% of the total project costs. The project lasted from the June 1st, 2022 to April 30th this year and is already completed. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you see the partners. There were 5 partners on this project. University for Adult Education Celje, University of Maribor, Employment Service of Slovenia, Youth Council of Slovenia, and NOSCO. NOSCO is our Norwegian partner. It's a Norwegian organization for supervision and cooperation. Next slide, please. On this slide, you can see what the roles of our partners were. So the People's University of Celje was the lead partner, and they were overseeing the project's overall management and ensuring that all aspects ran smoothly. They were the one that identified, connected with the needs. They did a kind of a street work, and they also created a comprehensive program tailored to the needs of the needs. They empowered participants, enhanced their social skills, and cultivated a sense of belonging, which is also very important for this group. The University of Maribor brought their analytical expertise to the forefront, conducting in-depth research to understand the need phenomenon, the need identification methodology developed, detection model design, and also the model validation. The Youth Council of Slovenia was our NGO partner. They developed a two-tier mentoring scheme. They prepared the mentoring book and also supported need individuals through this mentoring. As for the PES Employment Service of Slovenia, we included our counselors in this mentoring scheme, supported need through mentoring, and also prepared proposals for the legislators. NOSCO organized for us a study visit. They already had some very good practices for the successful inclusion of the young needs in society. And they also provided constructive feedback and recommendation for improvement on with work on the project. Next slide, please. Identifying young people at risk of becoming needs is crucial for early intervention. Traditional methods using education and employment data have their limitations, so the Preseneti project developed a novel method utilizing healthcare insurance data. With this method, we can identify potential needs at crucial junctures, dropping out of secondary school, not transitioning to work or further education after school, and failing to complete or find employment after higher education. Next slide, please. So here we see some lessons learned. What have we learned? A unified database for the need population is recognized as necessary, and it also must include some of the basic data that enable the creation of appropriate individualized reintegration program. Institutions understand the problems of the need differently as needs themselves. Young needs understand their problems as combination of personality problems, peer influence, family situation, and organizational constraints, and all these factors must be included while developing a program for them, especially because institutions are generally understood as relatively rigid, unfriendly, distant, and to a certain extent incapable of solving the problems faced by young needs. As I mentioned, we also collaborated with an NGO on this project, that's the Youth Council of Slovenia. We did run into some obstacles in this area. We, as PES, were unable to share information about unemployed individuals with the NGO due to the data protection regulations. Therefore, we connected with needs through other channels, through social media, social networks, which are, again, more suited for the NGOs than governmental organizations. There is also a difference in how NGOs and the PES communicate with young needs. We aim to help people find employment, equip them with necessary skills for success. And the Youth Council, on the other hand, also valued other forms of reclusion that are less job-related. Through two-tier mentoring training that we developed through this project, we were able to explore and find common ground on our approaches. We shared key information, working methods, and the project mentoring handbook was shared later with all the counselors at the Employment Service of Slovenia. Also, NGOs tend to be a bit more flexible in the project roles and less focused on long-term planning compared to governmental organization. To bridge this gap and improve our collaboration, we had regular meetings that were organized by the People's University of Celje, so by the lead partner. A key insight gain is that progress takes time. Our project spanned from the June 2022 to April 2024, with only a portion dedicated to mentoring. To achieve more subtle shifts within the need group, long-term involvement is essential. We are concluding the Presenitise project with an optimistic view of the future. The project has achieved key results, such as developing a methodology for early detection of the needs, creating a handbook for counselors, organizing workshops and training, and raising public awareness. We will use this acquired knowledge in our further work with the needy individuals, and we are convinced that the project will leave a lasting impact and improve their position in Slovenia. Next slide, please. Thank you for your attention. And maybe on this slide, you can see some of the photos that were taken during our project. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Marietka, for that really interesting presentation. With everyone's permission, I'm going to allow the webinar to run over 5 minutes. So we'll take 5 minutes now for any questions and answers and reflections, Eamon, before we then take the last 5 minutes just to wrap up. So Eamon, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Extremely interesting. I mean, first of all, I think that your guidance on a methodology to assess the risk of people becoming NEET could be really useful to share with people from the webinar and more widely. One particular question, do you have slightly different or maybe more different approaches for dealing with NEETs from different groups, potentially single mothers, ethnic minorities, or maybe Roma specifically? So is there a kind of more specific approach for NEETs within different cohorts or different groups?
During these projects, we did not have representatives of all of these special groups. We did have some from youth with migrant background. So for those people, we did try to like a tailor-made for them, to give them everything they need to get a job. So for these people, it was very important for us that we motivate them, for them to register at the Employment Service of Slovenia, because later on, when they were registered, we could help them with active employment policy, so they could enroll in a class of Slovenian language that was free for them, that they did not need to pay for. And also the People's University of Celje helped them to get some of the information they didn't have, like how to use the bus, how the institutions work. So we really did, it was only 30 people, 30 mentees, and we really did try to adapt to the project, to their needs.
Thank you. Could you give us a little bit more insight into how you trained your own staff for taking on this rather specialised role? So were there kind of particular new training requirements and development needs for the staff who were involved?
Yes, thank you for this question. So the speciality of our project is this two-tier mentoring scheme. So the NGO, the Youth Council of Slovenia, was the one who did the training, and firsthand they did these workshops in which we included 20 of our counselors, and the Youth Council of Slovenia included 20 of their mentors, and together we gathered all this knowledge that we have, all the techniques, and the handbook was made. And then later on, this handbook was very helpful for all the mentors that were involved in the project. And we also, of course, spread this knowledge through entire PES. So also the rest of the counselors received this handbook because it's really a good handbook. Its speciality is that it's kind of it has also formal and informal knowledge in it, because we have different approaches, the PES and the NGO. So this is really the speciality of this project.
Thank you. The whole theme of empowerment of NEETs came across very strongly during your excellent presentation, and the role of mentors appeared to be particularly crucial as I was listening to you. Could you give us a little more information about how long a mentor could, potentially be involved in supporting a young person? So how long can that relationship actually take place potentially?
It really depends. It depends because the young NEETs have different kind of obstacles when they're looking for a job. But what we learned is that maybe a job is not the first goal we should go after. Sometimes the first goal can be just for them to kind of get some social connections, to meet like other needs, other young people. For some, it is also a big achievement to go outside to meet some new people. So we did during our project, this mentoring was only 3 months. But like through the Employment Service of Slovenia, we can see that sometimes it takes as long as a year to get some results when working with young needs.
Thank you. I think one of the paradoxes of working with the people furthest from the labour market is that sometimes the people who would most benefit from assistance can be some of the most reluctant to take up offers of help. Could you give us any insights into how you actually engage with people who perhaps were really, initially not particularly open to your very excellent kind of offer?
Yes, I think, as I mentioned during my presentation, some groups do not see the benefit of cooperating with institutions like PES. It is really important that you help them, that we help them to gain this trust, that we are working with them and not for them. Because only then the solutions that the solutions need to be the one that are you find together. It cannot be like a solution we think it's best, but it has to be something of a compromise, what is achievable, and it has to come from within the person. I think this is very crucial for this with this type of groups.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. That's a really powerful final message, I think, for you to pass on at the end of your intervention and contribution today. So thank you for that. I'm afraid, Eamon, time is, as always, against us.
Yeah.
Just before, there's a couple of things we'll do. We'll launch an evaluation at the end just to get feedback about how we can improve these webinars for you to better meet your expectations. I'll shortly give the floor to Elodie again for some final words. But Eamon, was there anything else that you would like to say before we conclude today's webinar?
Just extremely briefly, I know we're pressed for time, Ed. I mean, I think both presentations from the member states were fascinating. There's a long debate about what constitutes a green job and what are green skills. And I think our colleague from Solus gave a very good practical example of the kind of areas that we should be focusing on to deliver the green employment agenda. And our Slovenian colleague gave some excellent examples of exactly how we need to try and promote kind of more, I suppose, autonomy, and help needs to recover more confidence to enable them to kind of access the labour market, and how outreach needs to be particularly well targeted, and also insights from service users need to be taken into account, improving the programs over time. So I think that'd be my overall comments on the two presentations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Eamon. So without further ado, I'll invite Elodie Fazi again from the PES Network Secretariat in the European Commission to give us her closing remarks from today's webinar. Please, Elodie.
Ed. Yeah, you can hear me. So yeah, thank you. Thanks to everyone. I think it's been a very active meeting, following online the chat and the different tools. So obviously today really was just a teaser, as you understood. I think, of course, we invite all of you to go through the actual PES capacity report. I have a number of you who wrote to me also privately asking whether it's been online. I put the link in the chat. I also put the link to what we call the Knowledge Center of the PES Network. And there, I think you can really find a lot of information about more qualitative information about all the topics we've dealt with today. We have recent studies, reports on green skills. We have report and practices on the youth guarantee. We have lots of things also on those further from the labor market. So really have a look at the Knowledge Center, and I hope you will find actually what you're looking for. Because obviously, as we said, the aim of this capacity report is really to look at the broad trends, to give you the data that you actually are provided by our members, but there's really much more also to what the network does. So I wish you a pleasant reading. But coming to content and the challenges we discussed today, I think, well, it's not a surprise, but the webinar actually confirmed again that there's really a number of trends and in PES which could even accelerate in the coming years. We see a stronger focus on skills, although the landscape and the responsibilities between PES are very different, very patchy from one country to the other. We see a strengthening of services to employers. We see digitalization progressing very fast, but we also see some new target groups for PES, especially those who are further from the labor market. So we've spoken about needs today, but it's quite clear that public employment services are also strengthening their services to other target groups, such as those who are not yet registered with PES, persons with disabilities, for example, and that will be the topic of our annual conference in November. So I think all of this really shows that the very raison d'être, the core work of public employment services, how they work with partners could change even more in the future. So there's also a lot of food for thought for us as a network at a moment, obviously, which is also very important for Europe with a change in leadership. And just to conclude, I also invite you to have a look at the memo that the PES Network has just put forward for the next European leadership with some very concrete recommendations about what could be done at EU level. So what are the next steps? You will receive the link, the presentations to today's webinar, and we will be back in the second half of the year with a webinar on a very important topic, which is the use of AI in public employment services. So I can only invite you to stay tuned if you want to register to the newsletter to get more information. And you know where to find us in the PES Secretariat on LinkedIn. And I will stop here. I would like to thank all the support team, obviously Eamon, Ed, and all our speakers for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Elodie. There's excellent and clear closing words. Yes, I think we could have kept talking for a long time about all the interesting content of the report. We encourage people to download it, to read it, and there'll be more opportunities through the PES network to discuss and exchange about examples and from different national contexts. I wanted to add my thanks particularly to Nicola and Eamon for supporting me in the moderation and overviewing the report, and our excellent national contributors. Gronya from Ireland and Marietka from Slovenia. It's always incredibly valuable to have these national examples that bring these kind of European reports to life. So there's an evaluation, if we can have that on screen. Yeah, I think if people could give us feedback, it always helps the network to improve its events, to better meet your needs. Obviously in a webinar, you can't do everything, 1.5 hours, but we've tried to give you some inspiration and a real taster of the content of the report. But do let us know any feedback and how you see these events in the future. With that said, I think it's time to wrap up. Sorry for going over slightly, but there's a lot of interest, a lot of questions, so we wanted to give as much time as possible to those. So thank you for everyone for joining us and for staying with us. And we hope to see you next time at the next PES Network event. Have a good day.